As many of you know who follow the podcast, Johanna and I recently recorded our 100th episode. And it after we did that, we took a look at how the podcast was doing in general. And Johanna, because this is part of her job in managing my life and being not just my podcast producer, but also the operations manager of my real estate business, said, I think that we should take some steps to get a broader audience and perhaps, crazy idea, monetize what we're doing here. I mean, Mom, you've been working really hard on this. Could we actually make some money from it? And I said, as I always do, it would be so cool if there was a financial reward component to this podcast. But the truth is, we do it for the love of it. And so she made an appointment and we spoke to a podcast consultant who was, I would say, less of a consultant and more of a salesperson, who wanted to get us involved in a coaching program where they would tell us, how to figure out our keywords, how to increase our audience, how to figure out who we should have as guests that would actually help us make some money from this. And in that process, what I figured out was that I care less about making money and more about telling stories. Although, yeah, if you guys want to send us $1 an episode or something like that would be quite lovely, because every hour that we spend creating this, we have less time to for what's our real job. Even though I'm just talking in circles because I don't really care about making money with this podcast. But the interesting part of speaking with the consultant slash salesperson is that he made us go through this exercise of why we do the podcast. And that was an eye opener in and of itself, because sometimes you're so in the middle of something that you forget about why, or you don't quantify why you do something. And after we spoke with him, I thought to myself, why is it that we do this? And I thought about the answers that we had given him. I explained to him how the I Love New Mexico blog started and how it progressed, and the moments we had where I wasn't as devoted to creating content about New Mexico as other times. And then I thought, wait a second, that's my next podcast episode, because it feels like we have this very devoted core fan group. And thank you to all of you out there who are in that devoted group. And it felt like a good time to go back and explain to everybody how this began and why we want to continue, and why we continue to give energy to something that doesn't really make us a lot of money, but makes us very happy. So, the I Love New Mexico blog was obviously the first piece of this content creation that is all based around things that happen in New Mexico. In 2009, I was living in my hometown of Logan, New Mexico. Johanna we had moved there in 2004, and she had gone to 8th through 12th grade there. And it was, I thought, really a gift. I mean, she would tell you she probably has two different versions of that. One of which is that she got to move to the town where her grandparents lived, and she could walk over to their house for lunch every day. Memories that we really cherish now that we've lost both of them. They could go to her events. They could watch her get inducted into the honor society, or go to a track meet, or go to a volleyball game and watch her play. And the other thing is that we could spend time around family and old friends that we couldn't have done if we had stayed in Albuquerque at that point in our life. So we had been living in Logan for 5 years, and she had graduated from high school in May of 2009. So by the end of 2009, I was feeling kind of lonely. I was a single mom. I lived in this place where in the summer times, because of Ute Lake, Logan was huge fun. and there were always a lot of people in town, and I was working as a realtor, and I was very busy during the summertime. I also worked on the side as a paralegal, trying to keep, you know, trying to make ends meet, hold things together. I had this crazy schedule where I would do real estate maybe Thursday through Sunday, and then on Monday morning at like 6:30 in the morning, I would jump in the car and I would drive to Clovis, and I would work for Randy Harris as a paralegal. And I would do that work, put in some 10-hour days, and then I would run back home. I would spend the night with Glenna, usually my one of my oldest friends in my life. And then on Tuesday evening, I would shoot home so that I could be back in Logan for school activities and to work at the real estate office. So 2019 had been this very busy year. Johanna graduating from high school, and this summer, why do I keep saying 2019? 2009. I keep trying to shave a decade off of my life. But in 2009, I had this crazy schedule of trying to make ends meet, and I was lonely for my girl, for my daughter who had left home and was a freshman at the University of New Mexico. And my friend Elaine, who was my writing partner at the time, she and I, she was not such a secret writer. She loved to write articles, and she was working on a degree at a stage in her life when most people are sort of settling down and considering retirement. But Elaine was going to school. She was an artist. She was a painter. She was very accomplished. And she was also writing all the time. And she said to me, Bunny, you and I are going to be writing partners. And every time you write something, which I did on a regular basis, she would say, send it to me. I'll tell you what I think. I'll send you what I'm writing, and you can tell me what you think. And so we were shooting writing these pieces of prose back and forth between each other. She lived in Logan, and she would drop by the office and say hello to me. And then she would say, what'd you write this morning? Because she knew that I had this practice of writing 1,000 words every morning. And I would say, oh, God, Elaine, it was such dribble. She would say, no, 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 send it to me. I'll tell you the best parts. And then she would send it back to me where she had highlighted maybe one sentence. And she would say, look at this. This is a gem. This is a piece of art. It was so incredible to me to have somebody who took what I had been doing my entire life and looked at it and said, wow, look at, so even if I'd written 1,000 words, she might pick out a string of 7 words, and she would send them back to me, and she would say, save this because this is really, really good. She didn't pass judgment on the rest of what I had written. She only told me what I was doing right. And then one evening in October, because Elaine and her husband also had businesses in the Philippines, and they would fly back and forth. She had lived for a while in Korea and had taught English at a school in Seoul. And she would send me emails and say, look what I'm doing. Look at what I'm teaching these students. This is how I'm teaching English to kids who don't have any idea how to speak English. She would do that while she was in Seoul, and then she would come back and we would get together and we would talk about we talked about words all the time. We talked about the importance of words, which then became the importance of stories. And in October, she came back from a visit to Seoul, and she said, Bunny, I'm writing a blog now. And I was like, what? And she said, I don't even know what a blog is. And she said, oh, no. You got to get online. You have to take a look. You have to see, here's this person you can follow, this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. I think if you pay attention to what he's doing, he'll give you some ideas. But I think that we ought to be writing a blog, because now that we've been sharing all of our words with each other, I think it's time to put them out in public. And I know this will surprise those of you who know me not now, but at the time I thought, I don't want to put my words out in public. I mean, I'd been writing a novel my entire life, but the reason it had never seen the light of day is because I couldn't bear the thought of actually failing. I couldn't bear the idea that somebody might read my words and say, you are not a writer. I mean, this whole persona that I had based my internal confidence on might be dashed against the rocks of somebody else's criticism. I would say I've learned a lot since then, which is that everybody's going to be critical at some point, or a lot of people are going to be critical, but the people who matter are going to support you in the best way possible. And Elaine was that person for me. Anyway, she said, Bunny, you have to start writing a blog. And I was like, oh, God, what is she even talking about? So I did what I always do. I got online and I started following Gary V, who at the time was just Gary Vaynerchuk. And um, he was the one person who had been blogging longer than anybody else. And he talked about what blogs were and why they should be written and why we should present them to the world. And it's the funniest thing is that at the end of December, when Johanna had come home for Christmas, and I think that Zachary might have been home for Christmas as well. Late at night one night, I was reading Gary V, and it was still about, well, what do you write about? What do you write about? Here Elaine was writing about her travels, and she was devoted to doing it because she said, if we write blogs, then our kids will know us better. Maybe after they've grown older or maybe after we're gone, which seemed like the funniest thing in the world because Elaine and I were young at that time. In 2009, I was 49. And I knew that it was going to be a long, long time before either of us died. But Gary V said, if you're going to write a blog, you should write it about what you love. And so I thought, well, this was my musings over several evenings, making notes in a little notebook, which is something I still do every day. I thought, what is it that I love? I mean, I could write about my kids. I love my kids. I love my family. I love my parents. But what do I really love that is sustainable and will be interesting to other people over time? And I realized that what I loved was New Mexico. And thus, the I Love New Mexico blog was born. And my first blog post was written about the Three Bears Lodge in Red River because for my birthday, my boyfriend at the time took me to Red River for the weekend and we stayed at the Three Bears Lodge. And I wrote a blog post about that. And if you want to find it, you can go back to the very, very beginning, where you'll find, I don't even know. This is under ilovenewmexico.wordpress.com, where the blog began in 2009. So I wrote a blog post about that. And then I wrote a few more blog posts about Two Casitas, where a place that we stayed in Santa Fe, long before I considered living in Santa Fe. Then I wrote a few recipes. One of the most popular blogs at that time was about my green chili breakfast, which had a very simple recipe for making green chili sauce. But thus, the I Love New Mexico blog was born. Now, how do we get from the I Love New Mexico blog to the I Love New Mexico podcast? So the cool thing was that over all this time, I'm writing all these blog posts and Elaine is encouraging me and she keeps saying, you got to keep doing this. You got to keep doing this. And then Elaine died. It was shocking. It was a shocking event in my life. And at a moment when I was thinking about stopping, at a moment when I thought, man, I'm just getting like 2 comments per blog post and I don't have that big a following and this is taking up so much time and energy. I lost Elaine as a friend. She was in an accident and at home and passed away at a very young age. And I thought, wait a second, I can't stop. I mean, I can't stop. I can't stop writing. I can't stop exploring. I can't stop caring about sharing stories. Now, I mean, I can't, my own heart is broken at the loss of this great friend. I guess I got to keep moving forward. in the middle of all that, and actually at this, about, I can't tell you exactly now. I can't look back and tell you the date for when we lost Elaine, but I also started thinking about moving away from Logan. And Johanna was now almost finished with college, and it just felt like it was time. I had been really ugly dumped by the boyfriend who had taken me to the Three Bears Lodge, like so ugly dumped that he had like found a different girlfriend while he was living with me, and they had moved sort of down the road from me, so that I passed where they lived every single day, and I was like, I've got to get out of here. So I moved to Santa Fe, which was a dream, which was made possible because I had started writing the blog. And then because I had written blogs for Two Casitas hired me to be their digital marketer. Other people hired me to write blogs for them. And I was able to take that digital marketing business and move to Santa Fe. And I moved to Santa Fe in August of 2012. It was a dream come true. I sold my house, made a little bit of money. I got here and moved here in August of 2012. And in November, and this is a story many of you know, so just indulge me here, but in November of 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, despite thinking I was the healthiest person in the room. Out of that journey, which was a long and arduous journey to get well, and the spoiler alert, of course, is that I survived. Out of that, and out of the 1,000 words a day that I wrote, and out of the confidence that was gifted to me by my friend Elaine, I was able to write a book called Life Saving Gratitude: How Gratitude Helped Me Beat Stage 4 Cancer. All of those, all of that, the being able to move to Santa Fe because I had digital customers, being able to write the book because I had created confidence from about growing an audience. All of that came from my friend Elaine saying to me, Bunny, look at these 5 lines you put in this email. They're absolute treasures. So I want to say today, first of all, I started to tell you the story of the birth of this podcast, but I want to tell you, if you can be that friend to somebody, you can change their life. That's what Elaine Gerard Quarles, she was a girl who grew up in Nervisa. That's what Elaine gave me. Elaine gave me this huge confidence in my writing and a love for telling stories and sharing them. And that, if you can give that to somebody else today, that's what I hope that I give everybody that I come in contact with. You can change their life. That's when you have real impact, when we lift each other up and we collaborate and we create something together that we never, ever envisioned at the beginning. Those nights in 2009 when I was listening to Gary Vee talk about content and doing what you love and writing about what you love, I had no idea that it would bring me to this moment in my life where I'm telling people who, we have downloads of about 250 per episode, but that grows every week. We are now at the point where I believe we've had almost 40,000 downloads of this podcast. All of that came from Elaine encouraging me to continue to write things and to continue to tell stories. But I want to tell you, it didn't stop with the stage 4 colon cancer diagnosis or the book that I wrote afterwards. When I wrote the book, I, agonized, as I had for years, about how it was going to get published. And I kept thinking, I talked to traditional publishers, and then I talked to people who had self-published books. And what I heard from everybody was that the traditional publishing route, which is very glamorous, and maybe your good book gets bought, maybe it doesn't, but then it has to get designed, and then it gets put on a shelf, and then it gets promoted, and then maybe you're going to make 50 cents a copy, maybe you're not, but it takes a lot of time. So I consulted with a company called Launch My Book, And the owner of that company said, Bunny, I've done both. I've helped people get traditionally published, and I've also helped them self-publish. But he said, if you want to get traditionally published, if you want to publish this book that you've written about your cancer journey and about how gratitude helped save your life, it's going to be years before it gets published if you try the traditional route. And he said, I can't guarantee you it's going to get bought. And of course, I still am not 100% confident about my work. But I thought and I thought and I thought about it. And I thought, the one thing I want with this book is I want my words to begin to help people who might find themselves in a place where they've been diagnosed with cancer and they're scared to death, because that's how scared you are when you get cancer. You're really scared to death because you're scared about death. I thought, I want to get this in the hands of people it can help, but I also want my mom and dad to hold this book in their hands. And so I said to Joel at Launch My Book, I said, let's do the self-publishing route. And so Joel helped me. They edited, they helped me get started, and we got the book published in January of 2021. I will say that the reviews have been very good. I will say that people who don't even like books have told me that they've been unable to put it down. I don't know. It's like having a baby. Once you get it out in the world, you stop worrying so much about the creation process and you just sort of move on with your life. But I got the book published, and in the middle of all that, while Joel was teaching me how to create an audiobook, he said, and you're going to want to do a podcast, right? And I was like, what? I can't do a podcast. And he said, no. It's really important to promote your book. Let's do a podcast called Life Saving Gratitude. Well, Johanna and I were in the middle of the pandemic at that moment, and we were shut down, and then we'd reopen, and we were shut down, and we'd reopen. And so we're like, we can do a podcast. We'll take that leap. And I will tell you that Johanna and I are an example of don't wait for perfect. Done is always much better than perfect. We just took this leap and began creating a podcast, and we did the Life Saving Gratitude podcast for, I believe, a couple of years, at least a year and a half. We talked to a lot of people about mindset and gratitude, and we heard, we told our own gratitude stories. And then after a certain amount of time, I said, Johanna, I'm kind of bored with the Life Saving Gratitude podcast. I mean, we've done it. We've had some fun doing it, but it feels to me like we're having a lot of similar conversations. And she said, in her infinite Johanna wisdom, she said, Bunny, she said, Mom, she doesn't call me Bunny. She said, why are you not doing a podcast about New Mexico? I mean, that's what you know. That's what you've always loved. That's what you feel is really important. And so 102 episodes ago, we began. And I want to thank you, those of you who have been faithful from the beginning, those of you who have only recently found us. I want to thank you, first of all, for sitting through this long-winded story of how we got to the I Love New Mexico podcast. I want to thank you, those of you who have listened to me talk when I've talked on my own about things like my favorite teacher, Mrs. Horn, who was 2 episodes ago, and we'll provide a link to that. I want to thank my guests who have shown up with enthusiasm and great stories themselves. And I want to thank the guests to come. I mostly want to say to those of you who are sitting out there and listening, thinking, I don't really have an important story to tell. I don't have things, I'm not creative. I'm not one of those people who is an artist or a creator or a writer or a storyteller. I want to give you a word of encouragement today, like Elaine did for me back in the fall of 2009, when we were both living in Logan, thinking we didn't have enough to do and thinking that our stories were not important. They are. Everything that Elaine recorded or said in those last several years of her life is cherished by her kids and her family. But more than that, the people that she encouraged, because I know it wasn't just me. I know that that was her gift in the world, was to encourage people and to make them feel like what they were doing was important. To all of you out there who feel like you don't have an important story to tell, get in touch with us. We'd like to hear from you. We would like to put your story on the air. And if you're not quite ready for that, just reach out to me. You can get in touch with us at the I Love New Mexico blog at gmail.com and tell us what your frustrations are or what you wish you felt brave enough to do that you're not quite sure about. This podcast was born out of a desire to put my fears aside and start telling stories that might change somebody else's life. I know they've changed mine, and I know you have too. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Here we go.